Well, good evening, Millbury. I'm your host, Chris Naff, and this is a special edition of the Naff Report. It's been a while since we connected this way. I think this is just the second show we've done since the election. And that's not on purpose. I wish I could spend more time with you in this platform, but things get pretty busy after you get elected to local office. And I have to say, in the first couple months since becoming selectman, I've become even more dedicated to doing what I can for the community. And it just is a dream come true to serve you and our town as a selectman. This is something I've wanted to do since I was a young kid as a junior here at Millbury High. So for those who supported our campaign and came out and voted this past April, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for letting my dream come true. So I wanted to take just a moment to sort of bring everyone up to speed on what I've been working on, what I've learned since entering office this past spring. And we will speak tonight mostly about Clearview. But I'll get to that in just a second. And I wanted to sort of share some thoughts I have since joining the board. And I have to tell you, from day one, when I got to my first meeting, and I looked around the room, and I saw my placard down there with my name on it, and I saw my seat ready for me. Got behind the desk, I sat down, and I looked around the room, and for the first time, it felt real. Like this is something that really happened. And because I've been wanting to do this since I was, again, a young kid, it just didn't feel real up until then. And I looked around the room, and I sort of thought to myself, how did I get here? Now I have to tell you, after a couple months of meeting with different folks in different departments and different boards and different special interest groups, sometimes when I look around the room, I say, how did all these people get here? But I'm not going to get too much into that tonight. What I do want to share are a couple of thoughts I have of how I like to approach operating our government, because essentially that's what being a selectman is. You are the top authority board in a municipality. We're trying to run a small government here. It doesn't get overly political, and if it gets too political, that's really on you at this level. The job is not one of politics. Mainly it's the job of administrative and operations. And it's been an eye-opening process. So what I wanted to do tonight is sort of give everybody an idea of how I go about making the decisions I do. And especially when it comes to something like the golf course, what we're essentially asking is you, the taxpayer, to do something. Because the way I see government is government actually doesn't have any resources of its own. In fact, the only resources governments have are resources they first take from you, the taxpayer. So government really has 0% ownership in the resources that it uses. At the end of the day, every dollar amount that the government spends is not our money as selectmen, it's not the town manager's money, it's not any particular staff or department their money, it's your money. And that's something I take real seriously, because at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer who owns, has a right to, has a claim to all the resources. 100% of every dollar we spend belongs to the taxpayer. Again, that's something I take very seriously. And there's always going to be some new demand on our taxpayers' resources. Just this year, we went to the taxpayers and asked for $1.1 million in new additional money just for roads. Now, I know in past administrations, there was a plan to save up money for the roads. Unfortunately, we came to the stunning realization this year we had to ask for another $1.1 million for roads this year. And that's going to cover about 1/5 of our immediate needs. So sometimes, unfortunately, as a government, we don't plan that well with our resources. So that's just one example of how often we go to the taxpayer to ask them to use their money. And we don't even ask permission. We just take it. Paying taxes to a local government is not a voluntary exercise. So that's how serious I take issues that come up, whether it's a golf course, whether it's the budget, whether it's capital improvement projects, and there are a lot of capital improvement projects that folks in town would like to see done. Just to name a few, some immediate needs that a lot of people would like to address is a new Shaw School, a new fire station headquarters, a new police station headquarters, and there are roads and bridges right now that are in need of immediate repair. In fact, right now, I don't know if anyone said it, I have no idea how the Wheelock Bridge is still open. That's how serious some of these needs are. So taking that into consideration, I think we have to be really methodical about how we go about spending your money. So when I sit in my seat as a selectman, I try not to think of what I would like. I grew up playing golf. I grew up learning how to play golf at Clearview. I have fond memories of that course. And if you ask my friends, I have a lot of frustrating moments at that course. I might have broken a few clubs up there too. I love that course. But I don't think my personal desires should force you, the taxpayer, to do anything. So what I do want to discuss tonight, and I will pause, if you notice, since our last episode, we've significantly increased our design budget. So just like the show we did on the school budget, I did want to break down some numbers pertaining to the golf course tonight. And I think at this point, everyone pretty much knows the basics. The owner of the golf course decided to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with a private developer. That private developer is looking to build what is estimated between 70 and maybe even over 100 condos. There'll be duplexes, so between 50 to X amount of duplexes. Now, I have no reason to believe the developers won't do exactly what they've outlined. This is sort of the niche market they like to deliver. And I think you could probably see them end up between 72 and 100 units. Now, I know new development causes pause for a lot of people. And one thing I think we have to think about is not every new development is the same. I don't think we're going to see, $500,000 colonials. I think we're going to see exactly what the developer has outlined. But what we have to decide as a government, as a town, is should we use the rights we have under 61B? So what is 61B? That's a special tax treatment. So for big pieces of property like farms, golf courses, other recreational facilities, they get special tax treatments. Recreational facilities like a golf course typically fall under 61B. So the deal these property owners make with the town is, okay, as long as we own the course, as long as we own this property, we get a reduced tax rate. Because if we tax them at the true value of the land, they would never turn a profit. In exchange, we as a government get to exercise a right of first refusal if they ever decide to sell the property. And that's how we ended up where we are now. So all we have to do is match the purchase price. And again, I know a lot of people know these basics, but this is what we're looking at. We're looking at a purchase price of $3.1 million. Here's the thing though, we don't have $3.1 million. We have a budget of about $42 million and we spend most of that. So we haven't done a really good job of saving money over the years. Our stabilization fund actually falls short of $3.1 million. Even if we had that amount of money set aside ready to go in stabilization, I would not recommend spending all the years we've saved up, all the money we've saved up over the years on one project. So our only real option is to borrow the full purchase price of the property. So what does that mean? Well, whether it's a 20-year note, a 30-year note, we're looking at north of $5 million in our debt service. So the true cost to buy this property is $5 million. That, I think, is one thing that has been missed in this debate. We have to look at the true cost to the taxpayers, and it's well north the $3.1 million purchase price. But what do we get in return? Well, if we buy that property, that we'll get about 118 acres of land. About 15 to 20 acres of that might be wetlands, so not all of it's usable. But what that does do is give us the option of keeping what everyone likes to refer to as open space, undeveloped land. Now, I'm not against open space. I think that's a fine idea. We're not Manhattan. We're not Sutton, but we're not Manhattan. And open space, I think, is a fine idea. The question is, what should we ask the taxpayers to spend? How much should we ask the taxpayers to spend to preserve open space? That's ultimately what we're going to be deciding at our special town meeting. So option one, we buy the piece of property. We, in return, get 118 acres. And I'll get to it in a moment, but we could do a lot of different things with that land. But that's essentially what we're trying to decide whether we should do or not. Option two, we don't exercise our right of first refusal. And this is where I think that the confusion happens within this debate we're having as a community. Not exercising our right doesn't mean we want an exorbitant amount of residential growth. Not exercising our right doesn't mean we don't have concerns about that neighborhood. Doesn't mean we don't have concerns about the condition of that road on Park Hill Ave. And it doesn't mean that we don't care about the stress it puts on our school system. I think the majority, and I can't speak for everybody, I don't speak for the other members of the board, my colleagues, and I don't speak for really anyone else in town except for myself. I don't think anyone who's opposing this deal is really looking at it in any other way than just the numbers. And I think that can't be overlooked because the numbers make the deal happen. And they're not my numbers. It's not my money. It's not the board's money. It's not the town manager's money. It's your money. And I think that's what the folks who are against this deal, I think that's where their strongest argument remains. Because if you think about all we have to do as a town, potentially a new school, new fire, new police, taking care of our roads and bridges, we have a lot to take care of. And it's also not a question of can we afford it. We have a good bond rating. We have a strong budget every year. The sky's not falling on Millbury financially. It is not a question of whether or not we can afford this. We can. And it's not a question of is having a golf course in town a good thing. It's not a question of the value of open space. All it is a question of should we ask the taxpayers to do this? And here's what I think is interesting. And I don't know if a lot of people have caught on to this one simple fact. If we don't exercise our right of first refusal, the developer will build as many duplexes as they feel that they can. That I'm certain of. It might be 70 condos, it might be 100. But what they are willing to do is give back to the town roughly 90 acres. So we could spend, as a town, $5 million for 118 acres, or we could spend $0 and have 90 acres given to us for free. That, I think, is something we have to keep in mind. Now, not exercising our right does come with, I think, some real and actual trade-offs. I think there's a potential that any new development could bring in more families, and that could put a stress on our school system. But I think we've all sort of lost the subtle art of cost accounting. Right now, we spend $16,000 per student. But what that doesn't mean is that every new student costs us another $16,000. Because we treat that as a fixed cost. We take the total amount that we spend on our school department and divide that by the amount of kids we have in school. And that's how we get to $16,000. That is a fixed cost it's not a direct variable cost. A direct variable cost would mean, yes, for every new student, we're spending another $16,000. Every new student becomes an indirect variable cost. Some students cost more than others. Some have different needs. So I don't even think we truly have a firm understanding of the cost accounting of running our school department. Now, if we call the superintendent's office, I'm sure we could get some good numbers. Our superintendent, Greg Myers, and our business manager of the school system, Rick Bedard, are very smart, and they know their numbers very well. But I don't want anyone to be confused about the costs here. And again, I don't even see this development as adding too many families. They're going to be 2-bedroom condos. And the target market is not young families. The target market is folks without kids, because folks without kids are going to want to buy these types of condos. But I don't have a crystal ball. Families could come in. But that's not really a concern of mine, because again, it's not a direct cost driver. In fact, school spending is up 43%, roughly 43% over the last 10 years. But enrollment is down 10%. So if it was a direct variable cost driver, the inverse would also be true. For every student that moves out, or every student that graduates, you save $16,000. That's obviously not the case when costs are up 43% while enrollment's down 10%. So I hope tonight we can sort of clear the air and sort of wade through some of these muddy waters of some of this data, because it can be kind of confusing if we don't fully understand the math we're looking at. And I think a valid point that those who are in favor of purchasing the course make is that this could put stress on our roads. I live on Main Street. There's a lot of traffic in town already, and any new development, commercial or residential, would add traffic in town. I think that is a great point. It's a solid argument. I don't think we can overlook that either. So that's a real trade-off, and I think for those who have a real concern with that, I absolutely agree. But let's get back to option 1, purchasing the course. Well, what would that mean? Some folks assume, well, we have to go out and run a golf course. And some towns do that. You may have heard. Some of our neighboring towns run municipal golf courses. Auburn does it over at Packagug. Westboro does it. And I think there's at least one, maybe a couple golf courses in Worcester that the city runs. And again, this is something where the math has been really fuzzy. And a lot of folks look at specific data points. But I think we can make some general observations of what some of our neighboring communities do. And I think the best example is probably Auburn. The course is close to us. It has a similar town to us. I think Westboro is a completely different market than Millbury, though Millbury still remains the greatest hometown in America. So Auburn's sort of similar. It's a similar size course, similar design. And I actually took a look at Auburn's financials on their golf course. And they bring in, I don't remember the top line revenue, but they made in last year a profit of $65,000. That's after they brought in all their revenue, paid all their expenses, their employees, so on and so forth. That's great. Good for Auburn. The difference is they already own that land. They don't have to pay debt on that land. If we go with option 1 and purchase the course, we absolutely would have to take on debt like we covered. What would that look like? The debt service alone for at least the first 6 years would be a little north of $200,000. That means if we ran our course as well as Auburn did, best case scenario profits, year 1, which I think is unlikely, we could expect to lose $135,000, if not even more. I think that's a decent cash flow projection on what we could expect from Clearview. Now, the key here is it's not my decision at this point to determine whether that's the right move. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, we've already sent this to town meeting. So my vote at town meeting has the same weight as yours. And if we wanted to buy the course and keep it running as a golf course, I think we could expect to lose money every year. What you and all of our fellow residents of Millbury have to decide at special town meeting, is that the right move or not? Again, that's what we're going to decide as a community. It won't be Chris Naff's decision. It won't be the Board of Selectmen's decision. It won't be the town manager's decision. It'll be our decision as a community. Now, we don't have to run the golf course if we buy the land. We could do lots of different things. We could just keep it open space and just keep it open space to prevent new development from coming in. We could do lots of different things. We have other needs in town that we don't quite have the right space for. If we want to do a new football field with a new track, we have to move our baseball field somewhere, and we haven't quite figured the right space out for that. So we could build an athletic complex up where Clearview is now. And I actually sat, before I was selectman, I sat on a Millbury Athletic Department subcommittee that analyzed the ability to build new athletic facilities. And we looked at a bunch of different options, and we realized if we wanted to put a new track in with a new football field and a new baseball field somewhere off campus, the cost became pretty staggering pretty quickly. That alone was $5 to $6 million. So if we want to put an athletic complex up at Clearview, you're looking at $5 million in debt payments and another $5 to $6 million before you take on new debt to complete that project. So at least $11, maybe $12 million for that project alone. Not up for me to decide. That's up for us as a community to decide. And again, my opinion on this carries the same weight as yours. My goal tonight is not to tell anybody how to vote at town meeting. I've been pretty vocal on this issue, and if you haven't turned into one of our Board of Selectmen meetings, or if you haven't seen what I've been writing on Facebook, if you want more clarification on my personal opinions on this, you can go to facebook.com/SelectmanNaff. And there you'll see right at the top of my page all my thoughts on this. My goal tonight is to sort of clear the air and help us wade through some of the muddy waters of this math. And the reason I wanted to take the time to do that is because this will be a very, very important decision for us to make as a community. This could determine lots of different things. And what I think everyone has to remember is that when we spend money on X, we don't get to see what those dollars could have done with Y. The money's already spent. Because again, government has no resources of its own. It can only allocate what it takes from somebody else. So every time we spend money on a new project, that literally prevents us from spending more money on a different project. Every dollar we sink into, I shouldn't say sink, that's subjective. Every dollar we either invest or spend or sink at Clearview could be dollars we spend on a school, a public safety complex, roads. Because, like it or not, though we are the greatest hometown in America, we are a town of limited resources. We can't spend money we don't have. Because ultimately, we don't have any money as a government. It's yours. So, my goal tonight really is to sort of look at some of these objective facts. And I don't ever want to pretend like I have all the answers, because I won't. And I'm never going to have the perfect solution to every issue we come across. And I'm not going to have the absolute right response to every opportunity we have. I don't think that's my job. I do think my job is to call things as I see it, and to take the responsibility of knowing that my decisions affect all 13,000 of us. So I know some folks thought very strongly that this isn't something we as a board should decide, and I get that. This is a big decision. But no matter what happens at our special town meeting, and no matter what happens at the ballot, I need everyone to know that we won't always agree, you and I. But I can guarantee you that I will work very hard on these problems. I'll think them through very seriously, issue by issue. And I'll take the time to really wade through some of the important information. But I think ultimately, whether we buy the course or we don't, we will end up doing something productive. Either we'll have a new development that brings in a great new tax base, could bring in as much as $500,000 every year, if not more. Or potentially we could have a piece of property that ends up being pretty valuable for us as a community. I think either way we'll end up just fine. But I do think if we can make the right decision, we should. So I invite each and every one of you to come to town meeting next Tuesday, November 20th. It's right here in the high school. If you haven't been to a town meeting, this might be a good one to go to. It's great to have the community involved in our government. And I say government because a town meeting, whether it's special or a regularly scheduled town meeting, that's the legislative body of our government. I belong in the executive branch as selectman. We all belong in the legislative. And that's what makes running our special community so great. So I hope to see as many as you of us there next Tuesday. And I think ultimately, no matter where we fall, we'll end up, something good will come of this. That I guarantee. And moving forward, I can guarantee you, whether it's Clearview or the next big issue that comes up, I'll work my hardest to try to do what I think is right for this town. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in tonight. I don't know when we'll be able to connect like this again, but I hope to see you Tuesday. Good night, Millbury.